The second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
You know, when she says,
"Oh, of course,"
when
I decide to deal with it.
"Why does there even need to be an International Men's Day? What have men done that we should be celebrating?" What I hear is, "I just want to go live in a grass hut with no electricity and running water and forage in the woods for food." HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. This Monday, November 19th, is International Men's Day, with men leading by example as this year's theme. November is also the month of the Movember Foundation's drive to raise awareness and funding for men's health, in particular testicular and prostate cancers and men's mental health. The Movember Foundation is a great instance of men leading by example. It started out as a discovery made by a couple of guys, Travis Garrone and Luke Slattery, who were originally just joking around about bringing the mustache back. They quickly realized they'd stumbled upon something fun in which many guys would enthusiastically participate. According to the Movember Foundation's website, inspired by a friend's mother who was fundraising for breast cancer, they decided to make the campaign about men's health and prostate cancer. The first Movember initiative, the rules of which are still in use today, was in 2003 and involved 30 participants. By 2004, the concept was formalized with a company registered, a website started, and a campaign run to increase participation. The movement has grown annually with increases not only in participation across Australia where it began, but internationally. Its reach has been expanded from its initial contribution to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia to partnership with multiple organizations. Today's Movember Foundation rallies 5.5 million participants to raise and contribute funding to men's health initiatives all over the world, with 1,200 projects funded so far, all because a couple of guys who figured out a fun idea others would enjoy, then took the lead to connect that with an area of need and work to keep people coming back to it. So you can see, leadership as an aspect of masculinity doesn't have to take the form of an authoritative commander who takes control of a situation and makes himself the decision maker for those involved. As with the Movember Foundation's humble beginning, it's an everyday quality that more often than not goes unnoticed, or at least unidentified. We see this in men's approach to ordinary experiences in which they take practical responsibility for not only themselves, but for their loved ones and often their neighbors, their communities, even strangers. This doesn't just manifest in CEOs and generals, but in small business owners, little league coaches, husbands and fathers, even the guy who walks his dog in your neighborhood when it's getting dark out just to keep an eye on things. It's not just the guy who organizes a rescue team like the Cajun Navy to help flood victims. It's the guy who checks on his elderly neighbor after a heavy snow because you never know if someone who needs help will ask for it. That tendency, taking practical responsibility, is why the cogs and wheels of society run. The bits nobody pays attention to unless a disaster takes them away, or the media draws attention to them. Much of men's leadership manifests in service to others. But how is service an aspect of leadership? Our civilization was built and is maintained by men leading by example. If you want to see that in action, look around your home. It's full of devices you use without thinking about their origin. Things that facilitate tasks, make you safer, save you time and physical labor, help you communicate, even entertain you. Most of them were designed by men. They were manufactured and delivered, if not to your door, then to the retailer who sold them to you, by a mostly male workforce. Most of them rely on services you only have because men take responsibility for making them available. And when you don't want a particular device anymore, you're assisted in removing it from your home, again, almost exclusively by men. We have electricity because men's response to their curiosity about their environment is to test it out and explore it, then compete with each other for the honor of having discovered and shared with their communities the most useful information. We have widespread, ready, reliable access to it because men take the initiative to apply that knowledge, build on it, and create tools to make the lives of people around them easier and safer. We have sanitation and sewer systems because men's response to adverse conditions in their environment is to figure out a way to eliminate, change, or manage them, and then do the work of applying those solutions. But why do systems like the power grid and the sanitation and sewer systems consistently work? While we know that dads' nurturing of their kids is vital, it's also understood that men take financial responsibility for their families. Among those are men willing to earn hazard pay, men willing to do dirty jobs because they pay more, men willing to learn complex concepts and processes, perform heavy labor, or focus their attention on activities that are mind-numbingly boring to earn their living. They don't have to be ordered by wives or bill collectors, go work at the power plant, or go get a job as a trash collector. They just do it. In those positions, they take responsibility for doing the job right every time they do it because the goal of the job is for their part of that system to function as it is supposed to function. They take ownership of their jobs and responsibility for the community they serve. They are accountable for the results they produce. They don't have to be the plant manager to take that degree of responsibility in their own positions. They just do it. Each, by his own example, ensures that his coworkers can rely on him and can be inspired to be equally reliable. His community can rely on him. His family can rely on him. His kids learn the value of his reliability, diligence, and consistency. I'm an example. During the years when my husband and I faced our toughest financial challenges due to changes in the child support system, our family's financial stability was on my shoulders, and it was the memory of my father's work ethic and dedication during my childhood that showed me the path to take. Much of what kids learn from their dads comes to them in this way. Yes, there are dad lectures. Yes, there are rules kids follow in their own homes. But it's what they see their fathers doing, what kids do together with their dads, that really shapes them. From their interaction with their fathers, kids pick up lessons and develop traits that serve them throughout life, from enhanced cognitive development to their own demonstration of personal accountability and their approach to everyday experiences, right down to getting involved when they see initiatives like the Movember Foundation and International Men's Day. Both events have grown from humble origins to international participation, handled controversy from some women's advocates who wrongfully view them as competition, and helped bring awareness of men's issues to the general public. This awareness is part of the main objective of International Men's Day, which exists to both celebrate men's contributions to society and highlight men's areas of need in an effort to promote gender equality. It's a good day for men everywhere to speak up. There's quite a lot to talk about. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 60, International Men's Day, Movember, and Leading by Example. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the lovely and intelligent Anna Cherry and she who must be obeyed, Karen Straughan, for a bit of an early celebration of International Men's Day, and in light of its theme, Leading by Example, a mid-month mention of Movember. Say that 5 times fast. But first, we've got to lead a horse to water. As you know, the social media gulag is ever expanding, which is one reason why we've diversified to multiple platforms. YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and audio-only formats, because we're stubborn. So, if you want to be able to keep track of it all, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. After all, with all of those non-shadow bans, you need notifications from badgerfeed.com to tell you what we're doing and when. And if you're still listening to our live streams on the main Honey Badger radio channel, please, that's old news. For our live streams, the Badger Live Streams channel is where to be. And last but not least, speaking of leading by example, don't forget to like and share this and other Honey Badger live streams so they'll have more social media visibility. If you want more people to be aware of the discussions we have on Honey Badger Radio, lead the way. With that, I'm going to shut up for a while and turn the discussion over to a couple of great female leaders, my co-hosts. But don't everybody talk at once.
I almost got a knee-jerk reaction to the female leaders thing, which is just terrible because we do need good female leaders. We're missing actual positive female role models that are kind, caring, own their shit, try to be positive in the world instead of a version of the most toxic man that, feminists have ever described, which is what seems to be the feminist goal, is to be that guy, to be like just intolerable. But I really loved a lot of things that you mentioned in the intro in terms of the contributions of men. And it's just something that I think is severely undersung and underscored. I think we expect men to be there for us and to do things for us. And I almost wish there was a male walkout day once, but men are too responsible to do that, or also so kept at the brink of. That's why actually we don't appreciate men. They're kept at the brink of like a doggy that you dangle out the window. That if you're never appreciated, then it's like that Eddie Murphy skit. When you're starving, the regular cracker tastes like a Ritz cracker. So we keep men starved of attention, and that way they do things for us and they don't dare walk out because they'll just get replaced by another man. And really that's where the crux of it all is.
Well, an International Men's Day walkout would just like a work to rule action, I think would be like a huge disaster. Like I think that it's just not feasible to have men take the day off. And I'm reminded of Eve Ensler when she was giving her keynote address in 2012 at the National Organization for Women convention. She's the author of the Vagina Monologues, if some of the listeners don't know that. But not only did she say, deep down in my heart, in my soul, in my vagina, I know the women's spring is here. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, you think things in your vagina. That was the first thing I thought. And then I was like, oh God, brain didn't even make it on the list. That's great. But she was putting out a call for V-Day. So Valentine's Day was going to be a day where 1 billion women, 1 billion women were predicted to walk off the job and go outside and dance in protest for better treatment and stuff like that. And I don't think that even remotely that many women walked off the job, but you would think that if women were as important as feminists are always telling us and as vital to society as feminists are always telling us, encouraging 1 billion of them all at once globally to walk off the job, to put down what they're doing, whether it's breastfeeding a baby or operating a piece of heavy machinery or whatever, managing a mutual fund or someone's life insurance portfolio or whatever, to just, put all that down and dance and demand better treatment. The fact that she thought that she could convince 1 billion women to put aside their responsibilities, 1/3 of women at that time, to stand in for the 1 in 3 women who will be raped or assaulted, sexually or physically assaulted in their lifetimes across the globe, right? That was why she picked that number. That she thought that 1 billion women would walk off the job tells you something about what feminists think of women and their sense of responsibility to their communities. As opposed to their responsibility to the sisterhood. With men, I think that you wouldn't be able to convince the men in those really vital roles, the roles where if every single first responder or every single garbage collector or every single, there have been, garbage strikes in New York City, for instance, and stuff like that. But to convince like an entire nation's worth of men performing air traffic control or checking airplanes before they take off and refueling them and stuff and all of those things, right? To convince them all to walk off the job, I don't think you'd be able to do it. They would be like, yeah, no, this is not something that we can do and maintain the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror. So essentially, I think that I wish that we could have a men's strike or a men's walkout or work to rule action so that they could get some appreciation for what they do, but I don't think it's going to happen. And as far as leading by example and stuff, I mean, some of my best memories of growing up were, my dad teaching me how to butter floor tiles when I was 8 years old, and holding the flashlight for him while he worked on the car, and also sitting in the living room and on Friday evenings, while the TV was playing the news and my parents were going through all of their receipts and balancing their checkbook. Those are like some of the warmest memories. My mom teaching me how to, knead bread dough and how to properly shell a pea, and, even how to patch plaster work and stuff like that. So I really had the most insanely wonderful upbringing by two of the best people I know. And one of them was my dad. One of them is my dad. And so, he led by example. He encouraged me to be tough. He encouraged me to be responsible. He encouraged me not to lie. He encouraged me to be who I was and be independent. Before I moved out, the last day before I moved out of the house, when I was 19, to go and move provinces and live in my sister's house and work in Victoria, because that's where good cooks' jobs are. He taught me how to change a tire. He taught me how to check my air filter and all of that stuff in the vehicle. So, that's just what men do. So
I want to point out, you mentioned air traffic control. There was an air traffic control strike here in the United States, and it was illegal, and it was actually it was penalized. That was when Ronald Reagan was president, and it was one of the things that's like there are people who absolutely for their entire life will hate Ronald Reagan because of the way that he handled the air traffic control strike. But it was illegal for him to do that, because the government has decided that, well, it can treat men as disposable in terms of, we'll draft you and send you into war even at 18 years old. We'll have you doing jobs where you can get killed on the job, and we only mandate safety features on the job when somebody gets killed, and so on. Their work is not disposable. Their work is vital. And so my calculus teacher, when I was in high school, I actually benefited from this. This is a sad thing to benefit from, but he had been an air traffic controller, and he was part of the air traffic control strike, and Reagan just fired all the men that went on strike. And he ended up teaching calculus in a high school, and I believe that's a lot less money than you make in air traffic control. At least I hope those guys get paid a shitload of money, because it's a very, very high stress job.
And, from what I understand, the military, especially air traffic, are like, we actually know someone, and they just got a promotion. And he's like, I have way more fucking money than I know what to do with. I have to start investing it or something, because it's just way too fucking much. It actually is a problem.
But they deserve it.
Yeah,
they deserve every penny.
Sure,
because this is like, essentially, they are doing, what they are doing is saving people's lives every day. On paper, and one tiny little mistake. You make a mistake on a math test, you might get a lower grade. You make a mistake on that math test, and 250 people get killed in an airplane accident, or 500 because two planes collide. So, yeah, it's not just whether men are willing to strike or not, or whether the consequences bother the men involved. When men ask for what women ask for, when men ask for even just fair treatment on the job, it's a fight. And sometimes the government will step in and tell them, you can't ask for this. You can't ask this way. You have to be on the job, and we'll promise you that we'll treat you fairly, but you can't hold us to that promise the way that other people are allowed to hold us to that promise, because the work you do is too important to the country.
Yeah. No, we had a oh God, what's it called? A wildcat walkout in the BC ferry system, which is part of our highway system, right? So in British Columbia, the ferry system is a crown corporation, owned by the government, but run as a business. And it is an integral part of our highway system. So it is considered to be an essential service, and everybody who walked out was risking just being fired. So yeah, because I mean, when you think about it, when you think about the number of people that BC Ferries carries to and from work every day, let alone to and from, just vacation or being able to visit family, or an overnight trip in another city, or whatever, between it's not just the traffic between Vancouver and Victoria, which is the most, those are the biggest routes. Vancouver and Victoria, or Vancouver and Nanaimo, those are huge numbers of vehicles go and people go across every 90 minutes. But you're looking at smaller routes like the one that runs between Port McNeill, Saintula, and Alert Bay, that ferry kids to school in the mornings and the afternoons, high school students to school every day and back home. And that is considered such an essential service that if a child does not have money to ride, but needs to ride the ferry to get home, they by law have to take them, right? It's considered that essential, because otherwise you're stranding a child in a position where there's no other way for them to get where they're going other than on that ferry. So,
and this is something that we see sort of throughout our society, where there are areas of profession, there are areas of labor, there are areas of, just basically keeping track of things, areas that women don't even think about. It's not something, like, you don't sit around all day and think about how great it is, for instance, that your toilet works. You get upset when your toilet stops working. I do. That's because you have had to fix your toilet. But I
sat with V and showed him a video of my toilet flushing 24 golf balls on a live stream, and he was just like, "That is amazing." That is, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you go talk to 50 other women and you won't find one. Go talk to 500 other women and you won't find one who has considered how great it is on a regular basis that their toilet works. But one time that it's not working is enough for her to think about it. What's wrong now? You don't find, 1,000 women out there that sit around considering how fabulous it is that they are able to play all those silly little games on their phones, Candy Crush and all that stuff that you see advertised on TV, and when they want light, there's light. When they want their computers to work, the computer works. What they use on their job, most women anymore are using a computer on the job, that it does what it's supposed to do. They don't think about that every day. It's not a constant consideration. But if it doesn't work, it's of course very upsetting to potentially disastrous. And there's a man behind every single one of those, multiple men behind every single one of those, who would create a disaster if they went on strike. And I think air traffic control is one area where the government would step in and say, no, you can't do that. You can't ask that way. You have to find a different way to negotiate with us. And,
but at the same time, they allow nurses to strike. They allow, teachers to strike, and having teachers go on strike is it's massive. Yeah. It's a massive disruption for everybody because of the fact that now you have, now you have parents scrambling to figure out what the heck to do. Where do I put my kids while I'm at work? Or now I have to take days off work and look after my kids, because it's just like there's just, you rely on that. And I'm not necessarily one of those people who thinks, like the school system is the best, or sending your kid off to school is the best way to educate them. But, the fact that you have become accustomed to that, and now you have a job during your kids' school hours, and now you don't get to work as well because you have to do something with your kids. And nurses, I knew a woman who, she had this disorder in her eyes. She got, it caused her to get like all kinds of, what floaters are, right?
Yeah, I get them.
Yeah. The little squiggly lines. Hello, squiggly line in my eye.
Yeah.
But they would just build up and build up and build up until she eventually couldn't see through them. So then she would have to go in once every maybe 6 months or something, and get an injection of a chemical that would dissolve them right through the center of her pupil. And over time, the injections caused her to get cataracts. So she was getting cornea replacements. She was getting cataract surgery. She'd been on the wait list for, and almost, she was legally blind at that point. You have to be legally blind in Canada to get on the wait list for that kind of thing. So she'd been on the wait list for like 6 months. And then she had to drive down from Port McNeill to Victoria, which is a 5-hour drive, on the day of the surgery. And while she was en route, that was when the nurses went on strike. And she arrived at the hospital for her surgery, and they were like, sorry, we can't help you. Well, when can I be rescheduled? And they said, we don't know.
Oh, geez. Yeah. And women get away with stuff like that. Partly because, it's an individual who is affected, or several individuals who are affected, that have to just make new appointments and stuff like that. The power grid doesn't go down when nurses go on strike. So you have people have to actually complain to somebody, hey, I didn't get my medical care because nurses were on strike. And, there's a huge difference there. Same thing with teachers. And as far as teachers going on strike, I don't think they should have any less right than anybody else, but I think it's irresponsible when they do it. And it's not just because parents have to figure out what to do with their kids. It's because if you're going to claim that your service is as vital as we hear that education is, then I don't think you have a right to walk out on it. I understand that it's important that teachers be paid a living wage, and the teachers get benefits that are similar to the benefits of other professionals of their degree of education and importance and everything. But you're there for the kids, and you're there for the job. And I don't think my parents ever would have participated in a strike. I know my dad wouldn't. I'm pretty sure my mom wouldn't either. And I think that's the reason, is that they would not have felt that it was the right thing to do.
Do you think your parents would have participated in a strike over the fact that it was standard for one teacher or two teachers at a given school to monitor the kids during recess, rather than having a separate individual hired specifically for that during morning recess, lunch hour, and afternoon recess?
Well, my parents were teaching, that was the norm. In fact,
I know.
when my dad started teaching, he was a 6th grade teacher, and they didn't have a principal at that school, the head teacher, which was like, you have all the duties of principal, and you have all of the responsibility and accountability of a principal, but you don't have the pay of that level of administration. So you're doing the entire job, but not getting the entire recognition or any of that. And this is, you know, he was fairly, well, I guess when he very first started, he wasn't doing that. It was later on, but at that school where he taught 6th grade and was the head teacher, later on they set up a principal at that school. By the time I went to school there was a principal, and my dad had moved on to teaching at the junior high. And I did have my dad as a teacher when I was in junior high, so I couldn't get away with jack shit in class. Nice. And of course, that was the one class that I got my homework done in. I was really lazy about doing my homework for classes that were not, you know, like I did my science homework and I did my my social studies homework, because I didn't already know the stuff that we were learning in class. But my math homework I was really bad about. My grammar homework I was really bad about. Spelling I was really bad about, because I already knew how to do that stuff, and I didn't need to practice it, and the homework wasn't a challenge, and so I would like put it off and do other things that I found more interesting. My dad, though, he didn't hand out a lot of homework. His way of guiding the kids through their studies was something that he referred to as learning through discovery. And it's how you learn to talk. It's how you learn to walk. It's how you learn almost everything that you learn in your life outside of school. You learn it through discovery. You teach yourself. And there's no reason why students in a school cannot have that same method of learning through discovery. So they would explore various stories. They would talk about what they observed with it was almost like applying the scientific method to reading in English, and the things that you had, the rules that you had to memorize by rote. You know, those were he'd teach those mostly the normal way, but his methods were very different from those of a lot of other teachers. So I don't think he would have complained about a particular responsibility. His only concern would be, does this work?
Yeah, well, you know, all I know is when I was in school, in elementary school, it was the teachers who were on rotation. So, you know, they would switch out, you know, and they would each have their day or their, you know, your morning recess today and then afternoon recess tomorrow or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And it would to give them time to eat lunch, or there would be two teachers and they would spell each other off so they could quickly eat lunch. And one of them would always be supervising the kids outside. But by the time my daughter was in high school, she had a teacher who volunteered at lunch hour. Oh God, I forget how many days a week, maybe 2 days a week, to do run a sewing club. You know, sort of just join our sewing club and we can do some sewing projects. And so my daughter went and she joined that, and a teacher was able to volunteer to run that, but the teacher would not have been able to volunteer to supervise the students, you know, do the hall monitoring and stuff during lunch hour, because that was a paid job with the school system at that point, because teachers didn't want it anymore. And so you could only volunteer to do something that somebody wasn't already paid to do. I even remember we had some of the secondary employees at the school, in the school district, go on strike, and they had just the year before planted all of these trees on school grounds, all these nice young trees, and they all died. And the reason they all died was because it was technically illegal for the school to ask parents to volunteer to water the trees. And the teachers weren't allowed to do it either because the unions were,
Well,
it's crazy.
When my parents first started teaching, there were no unions in charge of the school systems. There was, like, the unions were there, they existed, but they were, in Ohio, they didn't have a union covering all the schools. What they had was a professional association. And the difference was you didn't strike. You didn't, go in and say, we are going to take our ball and go home. You went in and you negotiated as professionals with your administrators. And, your negotiation was about the value that you were providing to the students and the costs of becoming a teacher and the importance of maintaining enough pay that the teachers were able to meet the cost of living and didn't have to have a second job in order to make the sacrifice of becoming an educator rather than taking something like a factory position that made twice as much. And that worked. But the unions came in and they hammered basically at Ohio over and over again. What they do is they get a vote every year on whether or not the union is going to control the school system until they get in. And every school system in Ohio is basically unionized now. And then once they get that through, then it's done. They don't vote on it again. And I think for teachers, the thing that really should happen is they should have to keep voting on that every year. Every year, any industry really that's unionized, the employees, or every other year. So if they have employee turnover, every other year, they get a vote of confidence, and if they don't get enough people supporting, and it should be an anonymous vote, so the unions don't know who to get mad at, and the employer doesn't know who to get mad at.
Agreed.
And if they get a vote of confidence, they're still unionized, and if they don't get a vote of confidence, then the union isn't doing its job by the employee, and the employees can do something else like form a professional association. And that was something back when there were more male teachers in all levels of education. That worked. The professional associations worked quite well. And I think the things that seemed to usher in this idea of needing a union in the education system was you got more and more women involved, more and more female domination of the profession, and they changed the way they voted it in. And so they basically changed it in such a way that the votes of the smaller schools, the majority of schools in the state, didn't really matter because the city schools, which had a lot more numbers, were able to outweigh them. That's all neither here nor there. What really struck me when I learned about all of this is we hear about the educator and their interests and their struggles and everything. And it's almost always women talking about how they're not getting enough and how they're not being treated right and how they need better benefits to do their job and everything. But at the other end of it, the people that they are up against are quite often male administrators. And they complain about how much the male administrator gets paid. They complain about what decisions the male administrator makes. They complain about the male administrator's relationship to the community, the male administrator's authority over the system, and so on, but none of them go for that position of administrator. And I very rarely have seen, like I've seen 2 female principals in my lifetime, and both of them had been absolutely stellar teachers. most of the time it's been male principals, male superintendents, and mostly male school board members. And women don't go into those areas. They don't, and the school board doesn't really get paid as much anyway. But women, there aren't as many women interested in those administrative positions, and they don't want to take responsibility. So if they really wanted to make things different in the school system, then they would go for that instead. But what do? They go to the union for help instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really is sort of a case of having a professional organization, and one of the things Catherine Hakim at, I think she was the University College of London College of Economics, I forget. But she said that the ways that professional organizations do things when women overrun a profession, and the fact that the individuals themselves, the union members are not as involved. So they leave it all up to the leadership of the union. And they are less involved in collective bargaining, and the relative pay goes down, and all of those things. And it's likely because women on the whole don't need as much money. They don't need to earn as much money as men do. Because of the fact that most women, they are not the primary breadwinner of their household, at least not long term. Sometimes over short periods of time, but generally not, as a permanent situation. So you essentially have a situation where these women they just don't participate in those negotiations to the degree that men do. And I keep getting reminded of like a video that I did with in response to a video by Noel Plum, right, where I talked about it, like, okay, so there were men in the Industrial Revolution who were very up in arms about losing good jobs to multiple women with machinery who could do those jobs. So you might have 2 or 3 women on machines who could do the job of one man who was working with his hands and his back, right? And they were really up in arms about that. The women seemed to gleefully embrace that. Well, why? Why would they gleefully embrace working for 1/3 the wages of a man? Well, because they didn't need the money. Their husbands had a good job. My husband has a good job. All I need is pin money. All I need is a little extra, right? And little did she realize that she was, her husband was going to be replaced by 3 other women, who were willing to make that decision too, who only needed pin money and were willing to work for less. So you're looking at like a huge issue with, I think, in my opinion, with the fact that women are not as reliant on earnings as men are. And so they just, I guess their heart's not in the game.
And this is one of the reasons why, you look at men taking the lead it's when we talk about men taking the lead, it's something that we think in terms of men in administrative positions, CEOs, generals, that kind of thing. But that aspect, that men taking the lead at home, men being the breadwinner of the family, men being the linchpin on which the family is based and everything, and that is a traditionalist outlook. But it's also the way things have been throughout pretty much human history. That is pretty much how our society was built. That when a need presents itself, it's generally the men who step in and say, okay, well, we're going to create a protocol for this. We're going to build a tool to handle this. We're going to examine this and figure out, basically deconstruct it and figure out what needs to be done in order to meet this need, or in order to change things so that this need no longer exists. And a lot of times they're doing it at the behest of women, but it's the men who have stepped up and said, we're gonna fix this. We're gonna make this happen. We're gonna meet this need. And in terms of family, normally, unless something is broken, something unusual happens, some sort of disaster strikes the family, or some sort of outside force is applied to the family, or some bad decisions are made, in terms of, the single custodial mom from birth, from the child's birth, it generally is the man who is the breadwinner. And even in terms of the single custodial mom from birth, men are still the breadwinners of that family, because most of the time, you become a single mom from the child's birth, not necessarily from divorce, but from the child's birth. Well, most of the time you see women that do that, they're not doing it in a position where they are earning enough money to support themselves. They're doing it in a position where they're going to demand child support from the father and welfare from a whole bunch of other fathers. And given that the vast majority of taxes are paid by men, the vast majority of people who pay more into the system than they get back out of the system are men. Those single moms are supported by men, even if they don't admit it. Even if they, I get this, I get this Medicaid, or I get these food stamps, or I get this welfare check, or I get all of these things, because you can get quite a bit from the government these days. You can make more money being a single custodial mother on welfare than you can at a full-time job in a lot of instances. They're being supported en masse by men.
Yeah, no, in I think probably in many instances, like if what your choice is a minimum wage job, or or welfare and all the assorted benefits and stuff, then you are actually, in terms of cash value, you're getting significantly more than you would get at that minimum wage job. Even if you're, not going to have to pay any income taxes on that minimum wage, which you probably won't if you have a child, a dependent, you're still looking at getting more money. It's amazing too, when they do these, an analysis of wages and earnings and stuff like that, right? The difference between somebody's wages and the real cash value of their compensation is often vastly different. If you're an average teacher, so the average teacher in Ontario, and all of you Americans out there who are like, oh well, our teachers make almost nothing, whatever. It ain't like that in Ontario. Is something like $94,000 in salary. But then if you look at all of the assorted benefits, the extended dental care, the extended prescription coverage, and in particular if you put into your pension or your sort of retirement fund the maximum matchable amount that the system is willing to match, right? So if you put in the maximum, what you're actually earning in cash value is something like $130,000 a year. $130,000.
And see, in Ohio, the average teacher salary is about $57,000. And then they do have benefits. There's medical insurance, there's dental insurance and eye insurance and everything, but it's not like insurance in Canada. It's not like benefits in Canada. They have a retirement benefit, but the state teachers' retirement system in Ohio has been pretty much pillaged. It's really in bad shape. Both my parents are retired teachers, and that they have been really reamed financially. And if you have that retirement system, you have paid into Social Security all your life. Your eligibility for Social Security is affected by being a teacher. And you can't just collect both and keep all of what you collect, even if you paid into both, because public servant, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's on one hand, I'm sure there are people who consider that fair. On the other hand, you still have to pay just as much into the Social Security system as everyone else does from their job percentage-wise. You just don't get the same benefits everyone else does because your retirement is through the state. And they consider it double dipping, but what's really going on there is they're using
they're double dipping you.
Yeah, they're double dipping you, and the government does that. That's government is it's the government exists to take money from the people. That's it. But yeah, and this is something that, again, their unions have done jack or shit to help them with. So yeah. I'm as far as leadership is concerned and everything. I think my dad's right in that things were better for teachers when they had a professional association than when they had a union, and that was something that the professional association was something that I would recognize personally as an aspect of male leadership. Professional associations are more of a gentleman's agreement to be fair with each other and work with each other and have a common goal. Like the administration's goal is supposed to be the same as the educator's goal, in that they have a body of students that they want to prepare to become the next generation's workforce. That's the point of having a public education system, is to prepare the next. It's not for the benefit of the students, it's for the benefit of the community. So that you have a workforce coming out of your school system that is prepared to do the things that your community needs a workforce to do, and be the things that your community needs a workforce to be. And, it's not an individual benefit. It's a group benefit. It's a collectivist thing. And yet now, because we have this system of school unions, we've got the teachers are at odds with the administrators. And this is not to say, like, I am a largely anti-union person in that I think that unions are overblown, overused, overpowered, and under monitored. But there have been purposes in the past. There have been reasons in the past for a professional association, a union, a guild, anything like that, to allow for collective bargaining. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is the entitlement that creeps in, and the adversarial relationship that it creates. When I see men working together in terms of projects like just construction, like running a factory, like any kind of building or creating or growing. Generally speaking, when you put a middleman in between, that isn't necessarily, their interest isn't necessarily the project itself, and it's not the welfare of everyone involved and the success of everyone involved, you end up undermining what men would naturally want to do, which is work together and finish the project, work together and create an excellent result. And I want to, I'm going to go over some of the super chats, and then I want to get more into the Movember thing, because I think that's a big, it's a big discussion that needs to be had. It's a great initiative, and it's something that, you look at their story, it's really neat. But to start off, Hoki Bukisa gave us $4.99 and said, to be fair, I doubt the women in those critical jobs would even consider walking off for half a second. Salute. And I think he's right. There are certain critical areas where you just don't go into that area of work thinking, well, if I don't get what I want as an employee, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. And in the areas where the men wouldn't walk off, the few women that also take those jobs have that same attitude. You can't do those jobs without that kind of attitude. Albert Nada gives us $5 in Canadian and says, we can't get 200 guys to a rally, let alone walk off the job. Well, if if they have to travel and take time off work to come to the rally, no, we can't, because they have to work and they have to support their families.
Well, it's not just that. You can get men to rally for a whole bunch of things, but not in their own, not in their self-interest as men in general. You can get them to march in their self-interest or rally in their self-interest as workers, as one of the areas of men's issues that actually has gotten men off their butts and to rallies at times is, pertaining to their role as fathers. So essentially it really has to be a role thing rather than just a man thing. So I think, honestly, this is one of the reasons why Movember is so awesome, is because it doesn't require men to rally, and it's not like, could you imagine a bunch of men, 50,000 men in penis hats marching on Washington to demand rights?
Yeah,
right.
No.
To demand, maybe to demand regime change, maybe to demand, fair wages, so they can support their families. But then it's because my family, not because me. All of these things, men have gone to the mat over certain issues, have put their lives on the line, gotten kneecapped and killed by union busters, or by military police and special constables in the case of the Chartists, right, for what they wanted, but not because man in the sense of in any kind of sense of just because man.
Right. Men haven't protested on behalf of their gender in that way, and they haven't. You can't motivate a large group of men to protest on behalf of their gender. I think cockcats would be funny. I would go with a pun for that and make it a rooster coxcomb on top of that.
I'd make it.
That'd be the thing to do.
I'd make it a dickhead.
There you go, dick hats. But in any case, it's not something that's going to happen. You're right. And the things that the Women's March protested for, besides the fact that a lot of their protest was very vague and ill-defined. I mean, we went over that discussing last year's Pussy Hat March. Where a lot of the stuff they said was not specifically women's issues, that they treated as specifically women's issues, stuff that is just issues in general, and that's what feminists do. They genderless issues. Men aren't going to do that because they recognize the fact that things that affect men, a lot of things that affect men, affect everybody. There's men's issues within those issues, like due process. Due process is an everyone issue. Everyone has the right to due process. It is a fundamental human right to not be faced with a punishment for an accusation without having some sort of proof that you actually are guilty of that accusation. It's a fundamental human right. But right now, the brunt of violations of that right, the consequences of the violations of that right, are falling on men. And the attack on that right is taking the form of, we don't have to recognize that right because men are predatory. And so they've got several things they're doing there. They're wrongfully labeling men predatory, and they're wrongfully labeling a human right disposable if a man is the person whose right is being defended. And they're using that attack as the wedge to get rid of that right altogether. And that's like, so that makes it a men's issue, but it is still a human right, and it would just be, we wouldn't turn around and say, well, we're not going to support due process rights if the person in question whose rights are being challenged is female. A woman gets falsely accused of a crime that usually men get targeted with. We're not going to turn around and say, well, we're not going to fight for this woman's due process rights because she's not a man. Whereas what we get with feminists is exactly the opposite. And that's another thing, that men don't differentiate like that. This is a human right. Okay, we're going to fight to protect this right.
Well, one of the people who has participated in she's participated in a few cafe panel discussions here in Western Canada, in Calgary and Red Deer. She's with I think the Equitable Child Maintenance and Access Society and the Parental Alienation Awareness Association. But she is a woman who was, she was a career woman who found herself losing custody of her child. And just because, and this is one of the things that is so frustrating, is that the devaluing of father presence, right? So even if you have the typical traditional family where the dad, he works all day, he comes home, he's only home for maybe 2 or 3 hours in the evening before the kids go to bed, and he interacts with them. He doesn't change nappies. He doesn't wash their hair or give them baths. He doesn't heat up cans of alphagetti, right? He doesn't do any of that sort of hands-on work, right? Or what is perceived to be work in terms of childcare. But that doesn't mean that his interactions with his kids are valueless. Like he's a presence in the household that the child has bonded with, that the child it loves, relies on, has a psychological form of, I guess, dependence on, knowing that person's going to be there. And yes, so when the parents divorce, right? If the kid is in the sole custody of the mom, he's still going to have his hair washed, and he's still going to have cans of alphagetti heated up for him, right? And maybe the dad is going to have to, put in some effort to learn how to do those things. And that apparently is impossible because men don't actually learn things. But somehow there's this feeling that his contribution to his children has been solely monetary, and therefore that's really what it should be. And, continuing on, when in reality, it's the interaction and just the presence of dad is beneficial to kids. Even if dad is, often more interested in watching the game, or, is like, just hold my beer, son. Whatever, even those dads, their presence in their children's lives benefit their kids. So what we have is the situation where only some types of parenting are valued. And it's the, wipe the face, wipe the hands, wipe the bum, chauffeur them to Gymboree types of parenting, rather than the, hang out in the living room, watch a movie together, and tuck them in at night, and all of that. Like, so, I mean, like, I would have, if my parents had divorced when I was young, one of the things that I would have missed the most would be the wild man coming to tuck me into bed every night. Right? Because that was the special treat, right? When my dad would come home from work and we'd eat dinner, he'd scrub the black out of his fingerprints, and then we'd all eat, and then he'd have a bath, and we'd go to bed, and we would stay up, right? We would stay up and wait. We wouldn't go to sleep until he came in, usually just in his underwear, right? In his boxers, but with his hair all towel dried, so it was sticking up everywhere. And you'd see this silhouette of this man coming in through the bedroom door with his hair sticking up, and he'd kind of clench his fists at his sides, and he'd kind of growl. He'd be like, "I'm here to tuck you in." And it was like that was like awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'd have different things. One of the things that I got that most people don't think of, my dad really strongly affected my television choices. Like, I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do, I look for things like MASH, or just like older television shows, Hogan's Heroes. I watch cowboy shows and stuff like that. And it's because that's what I watched when I was in the room with my dad. My dad also, I always talk about, or at least joke about, my dad made every day take your kids to work day. A part of the joke is my dad was a teacher and we went to school every day. But in reality, my dad put a camera in my hands when I was 2 years old. He was learning photography. He was doing it professionally also. And he was going through that exploration of, what are all the neat things I can do with this thing that is both an art and a science. And so he decided he was gonna share that with me when I was growing up. And I spent my whole childhood learning photography and embracing, taking pleasure in looking at things differently, getting close-up pictures of the beads of water on a leaf after the rain, looking face on at a bug, which, a lot of the girls around me would look at that picture and they'd be like, "Ew, it's a bug," unless it was a butterfly. But it was that was my dad sort of shared with me through photography and through his his choices in entertainment and everything. Again, that idea of learning through discovery. It was something that he was really, really fascinated with, and it's like a part of his character, really. And that encouragement to go out and teach myself things about the world that way. That was something that I got very, almost exclusively from my dad. There were a lot of wonderful things that I got growing up, learned from my mom, that, mom shared with me, and one of them was part of the things I got from watching my mom was the importance of toughness not being a gendered characteristic. My mom has 5 chronic pain disorders, and they're measurable chronic pain disorders. They're not, something that you get diagnosed with because you complain. They're something that you get diagnosed with because you have a chemical factor, or something that can be x-rayed, or something that shows up on an MRI. And she worked all of my life, and she didn't back down from the pain and everything. In fact, she was always very proud of not backing down from the pain, and she didn't talk about it a lot. She just did it. And that was something, between my parents, I watched my parents value each other, and I watched the different ways in which they took the lead. With Dad, one of the big things that he did was he made sure, because Mom didn't talk about, I'm in pain all the time, but I do this anyway. You didn't hear anything from Mom about how much she hurt. She just did what needed to be done. Dad was the one that let us know, your mom is really, really working hard for you guys. He was the one that helped us to observe and recognize and appreciate what Mom was doing. And Mom did the same thing with Dad. You gotta be You got to be appreciative of the fact that your father has 3 jobs and he's working very hard. Let's think about whether we really need to spend on this and what we can save on and that kind of thing. And between the two of them, both of them had sort of a masculine style of leadership. But it was that stepping up attitude. I think that's probably part of the reason why I'm able to recognize it, is because it was there in both of my parents. But I'm going to go on with, let's see, we have Midnight, I guess that's Midnight ST, Midnight Street, maybe, gave us 10 euros and said, I'm about an hour behind in the stream, but I've been watching you for the past 5 years and always wanted to contribute. This is the first time I kind of can, so thank you for everything. And continued on with another 10 euros to say thank you for basically being the only voice I ever heard explaining that and how men are awesome and deserving of gratitude and respect.
No, that's nice.
And it is really, really nice to be appreciated for that. But thank you very much for listening, and thanks again for the contribution. And we're going to go on to Hoki Bukisa, gave us $4.99 again, and said, wait. Since when do computers work when they're supposed to? Most of the time.
Most of the time. Yeah. You only ever notice how well your computer works when it stops working.
Yeah.
And then you're like, why isn't my computer working as well as it did 5 minutes ago?
And to be honest, most of the time it's user error, although I have no clue. Somebody let me know my OBS wasn't broadcasting my screen changes, so everybody just saw us sitting there instead of the video, I think.
Oh, well.
Which sucks because it was a really good video.
As long as they're not seeing my hat hair, I'm happy.
Yeah, no. But, well, I mean, it's not us, it's our cartoons, but yeah, I don't even know why that happened. So I don't know what I did, but it's probably something I did. But yeah,
you know, knowing you, Hannah, it's definitely something you did, Hannah.
It's probably just because I was sitting in front of the computer. If I was not sitting in front of it, it would work just fine.
You've ruined everything, Hannah. Ruined it all.
Lord of Swarm gave us $5, US $5, and said, Karen, you have no idea how glad I am that I'm not your maintenance man, your poor septic tank / sewer lines.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't flush the golf balls. Okay, I showed V a video of a promotional video from the company that made the toilet that I installed upstairs here. And it flushed 24 golf balls. It flushed 2 pounds of cat litter with feces. It flushed
hopefully nobody does that in real life, though.
20, yeah, and it warns you. It says, please don't flush this. It'll destroy your plumbing system, right? But it won't, your toilet can handle it, but just the sewer system has yet to catch up with the technology in this toilet. Champion 4, Google it, or you search it on YouTube, the Champion 4 by American Standard, and watch the video. He was just like, V was just like, oh my God, that's the toilet I want. Can I get that in Romania?
Probably can't even get that in America.
He can't get it in Romania. But, and it's low flow, which is like pretty amazing. It's like 4.5 liters per flush, and it can swallow all of that. 2.5 pounds of orange peels, right? Just throw them in and flush. Yeah.
Men definitely did this. There's the problem of plumbing issues, just and you have your kids will flush things down the toilet that were never meant to go anywhere near a toilet, like their stuffed animals, or you know, things like that.
A toothbrush.
Yeah. Then there's the wife who will flush the goldfish down the toilet when it dies. Rather than, you know, disposing of it some other way. Which, if your goldfish dies and you have a garden, just put the goldfish in the garden. It's worked for centuries. It's not bad. For your garden. It's good for your garden. Don't put your goldfish down the toilet.
Put it in the garbage, for Christ's sake. Like, really? Put it in a Ziploc bag, like I did with my hamster and my rat.
I used
Ziploc bag, and
I used to have a vegetable garden. I don't have room for one here. When we move, I will have a vegetable garden again. But I used to grow, I always liked corn on the cob. Always liked my zucchini. Gotta have my zucchini. And I always liked green beans. And so I would put those all together. And I would get a fish, and I would cut it up, and I would take a little piece of fish, and I would put all 3 seeds in the, like a little indentation in the piece of fish, and bury it, and grow it that way. And every few feet in my garden, there would be a little piece of dead fish with seeds in it. And then my stuff would grow great. And
that's great if you don't have a dog.
Yeah, no, I never had a dog. Now, obviously, if you have a dog and you put your goldfish in your garden, you're going to end up feeding the goldfish to the dog by default. But if you don't have a dog, and well, even the neighborhood cats didn't dig it up. And we had a neighbor that had 17 cats. None of them dug up my fish. So it worked great. If you really are worried about it, put them in one of those little plugs that you use, those little dirt plugs that you use to garden, and and it works great. And you just train your pole beans up the corn stalk, and you use the leaves of the zucchini plants for mulch, and you got yourself. The one thing I learned is you don't want to plant too many zucchini plants, because there are not enough people in your neighborhood to give away all of the zucchini that you will get. But in any case, that's obviously the problem of people putting things down the toilet that are not intended to go down the toilet. Men came up with a solution of, all right, well, we'll make the toilet work better. And now they need to make the sewers work better.
I think the point of the Champion 4 is that it's low flow, but it really will take your poo on the first freaking flush.
So that it doesn't override the it's not worth anything to make it low flow if you have to flush it 15 times to get everything down, is it?
That's right. Right. Although the sewer guys who came to, because we have roots growing into some of our sewer line is clay pipe, right? And we're going to actually invest in getting a liner put in, which is yet another male innovation, a kind of like a stent for an artery. You know how they inflate kind of a balloon to expand an artery?
Yeah.
They can do that with your sewer line now. If you have roots coming in, they can put in they put this liner down your sewer line, and then they blow air into it to make it hug the sides of the pipe, and then they blow hot air into it to make it harden. And then now you have a nicely, beautifully sealed pipe that doesn't have the little gaps, the little joints in it that clay pipe does. So you don't have roots coming in anymore. So we're going to do that next spring.
Nice.
But the sewer guy said, well, if your upstairs toilet is low flow, you want your downstairs toilet to be normal, to make sure you're putting enough water down there to wash everything down. But yeah, it's like, so when I bought a toilet for downstairs and installed it, it was a regular flow toilet. But yeah, it's like a low flow toilet that will eat a loaf of bread. It is probably one of the most amazing toilets that I have ever seen. And the only time it ever doesn't do the job is if you take your hand off the handle really quickly, right? Because then it just like essentially aborts the flush, right? But if you keep your finger on the handle and hold it down for a full half second, it does the trick. Gets rid of everything.
All right. Well, on we go to Affiliator gave us $10 Canadian and said, if not for unions, then we wouldn't have a 40-hour work week. Most safety. If you want to read what life was like before unions, read Hard Times, The Road to Wigan Pier, or 2 Years Before the Mast. there were labor movements that were not union, and like the labor movement was not all union. That is like it's not that the unions didn't contribute, but the unions were not the reason that those things happened.
Also,
the people, the protesters, the workers themselves, were part of the reason why that happened. But that wasn't even the entire reason that happened. I think Karen's going to actually say the rest.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. When you have 123 women die in a fire in a textile, not a textile mill, but in a garment factory, because they've been locked in so that they can't take unauthorized breaks. And, you know, so you literally had 123 women die in a fire and at work due to unsound working conditions. And that was probably one of the biggest things, the outrage over those 123 women. Oh, and 23 men, who were not so much a source of outrage because that was just standard. But you essentially had what you had back then was you had the odd girl losing a finger in a sardine plant. Boys' hands were crushed in machine factories. So you had a bit of a difference there. You had labor leaders like Mother Jones, you know, kind of putting into the public eye the outcry of how dare we subject children to these kinds of conditions, and then how dare we subject women to these kind of conditions, and then, oh, look at these women and children whose husbands have been maimed on the job, right? And, you know, so a lot of it was about women and children, those 40-hour work weeks and the safety regulations and all of those things. And you can see this in every single aspect of, you know, I think it was Warren Farrell who said there are more laws against telling jokes that might offend a woman at work than there are against faulty rafters falling on men and killing them. That's just the way it is. And if you go a little bit back from that time, right, because I often bring up the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, and people say, well, you know, but you know, it was a labor movement, you know, on the whole, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, the changes would not have come about if not for those deaths. I'm going back and I'm looking at hearings for on colliery accidents, right? The transcripts of hearings on colliery accidents that led to the deaths of, you know, dozens or even, you know, scores, hundreds of men, over 100 men in some cases, right? In one of the cases, so you literally have a hearing where there's a jury deciding whether the company is at fault for the accident. And there was literally one case where the I guess you would call it prosecutor, the guy arguing that the company was at fault, right, is saying, Your Honor, why is the document saying that, like the decision saying that the colliery is not at fault, circulating amongst the jurors who are all signing, right, that saying it's not at fault, when I haven't even finished, like, I'm still interviewing, I'm still examining a witness here. And they're just like, we want to go home. This is boring. Just say company's not at fault. Right? So to say that there was, like, you know, like some kind of, yes, unions were big, the labor movement in general was big, but you know what really got those standards put in was women and children in the workforce.
Yeah. There was another aspect too, and this is something, like, I didn't actually know about this until I started looking into the history of labor. Part of the reason that, at least in the United States, that we ended up with a 40-hour work week was because Henry Ford believed that working too many hours actually reduced the workers' productivity. So he reduced, in the early part of the 20th century, they were at, I think, a 48-hour work week. and he reduced it to a 40-hour work week. And that was because he felt that the workers would actually work better if they didn't work as many hours. So there was already advancement taking place, but then you had a leader in the industry looking at essentially what is efficient, and a 40-hour work week he found was more efficient than working his employees longer hours. So there was that as well. And then you had there was a Fair Labor Standards Act. There were other labor laws that passed during the early part of the 20th century. There was the fact that part of the reason that the public was campaigning to get kids out of the workplace, obviously part of it was to protect children, but also part of it was because you paid children less if you were an employer. Children did not make what an adult man would make in the workplace, and so the competition for jobs there. Kids were going to win out in some areas where a man would have to be paid more to do that job, and so the labor movement actually wanted kids out of the workplace because they were taking adult men's jobs, especially older kids. And then all of that combined with World War I and World War II to get women into the workplace more. And a lot of times we hear feminists credited for getting women into the workplace. Conditions in the workplace and conditions in the job market got women into the workplace. And that was it. Once again, we see sort of a male leadership aspect there, that men made the decisions, men looked at what was needed, men looked at what was happening, and some men worked with other men to change the work environment. So, but going on to, let's see, we have the last one we've got so far is Albert Nata gave us $20 Canadian and said, first, get women to abandon men. Second, get women financially dependent on the, quote, system. Third, start taking their sons from them under penalty of being taken off the system. For males find themselves in internment camps. A brilliant strategy. So I just got to say one thing. You look at the way society is today. All of that's been done except for number 4, technically. We've had this system where women have abandoned men in a lot of ways, and it's to a reprehensible degree. And women have become financially dependent on the quote system to the degree that we had women throw a screaming temper tantrum in pussy hats because the system isn't paying for their shit. Stuff that men have to buy themselves, and paying for their shit with men's taxes. We have a system that wrongfully takes children out of their parents' homes more often than it rightfully does. There's a huge problem of Child Protective Services being grab happy when it comes to people's kids in their home environment. There are a lot of different ways to run your household, and there are a lot of different relationship aspects and characteristics that you can have with your kids that are not wrong. There's a lot of different parenting styles that are not wrong, but all you have to do is have the wrong person come in and look at your household. And it's not just the United States, it's Canada, it's the UK. There was a caseworker that came into a household in the UK, and specifically just because the father had a mental health condition, post-traumatic stress disorder, threatened to take the children out of the home if he was not evicted. Not for having actually exhibited dangerous characteristics, dangerous symptoms of the disorder, not for having done anything threatening or scary, just having that label. And there's stuff like that going on in all of Western society, basically. Everywhere that has a child protective services type agency. You get your kids get diagnosed with depression, you have to worry that child protective services is going to be called. Your kid's school says, I want to put your son on Ritalin, and you say, my son doesn't have ADHD, I don't want to put him on Ritalin, and you have to worry that child protective services is going to be called. And if they can sell your kids through their adoption agency, they're going to take them. So they have started taking women's sons from them under penalty of being taken off the system in a lot of ways. Just drugging them in schools unnecessarily. Not that when somebody actually has attention deficit that they don't need treatment, but when somebody doesn't have attention deficit and you treat them for it, it's extremely damaging, and that's being done to boys on a grand scale in our society. As far as the internment camps that we talk about feminists, radfems wanting, that would actually be a step backwards for feminists, because they have the entire country, right? They have the workforce. They have the fact that the vast majority of net taxpayers are men, and the vast majority of net tax recipients are women. Why do they need an internment camp? They have a nationwide work camp. They have laws designed to allow women to use I am offended as a weapon in court. They have laws designed to allow women to use I feel attacked, I feel scared, I fear attack as a weapon against a man. Why would they need an internment camp? They don't need walls. They don't need fences. They don't need anybody standing around with guns pointed at your heads. They have the federal government. So, yeah, it is a brilliant strategy. It's the most successful scam that has ever been run. And it's been working for quite a long time. And it's going to be up to people who recognize that. Men's rights activists, anti-feminists, left-wingers, right-wingers, libertarians, collectivists, anybody who recognizes that, to take the lead in fighting back against it if we want to see it stop, if we want to fix it. We have Fillerator gave us $10 Canadian and says, with greatest respect, Karen and Hannah's knowledge of the history of unions is puny. If you look into it more deeply, all the benefits were got by union collective bargaining or strikes. Well, that's, a lot of union representatives will tell you that. But the history shows that it's not the truth. Unions had their benefits, but just like feminists, when they tell you they single-handedly achieved things, they're lying. And it's not true. And while I know there's a lot of loyal union workers among our listeners, and like I said, I'm not saying that unions need to go away. This is just fact. Just like the history of gender issues is not cut and dried, black and white, women versus men. The history of work issues is not cut and dried, black and white, employer versus employee. And the presentation of it as such is actually damaging. But the fact that unions do exist is another tribute to male leadership. You've got to have some route of equalizing, basically, the level of bargaining power a wealthy employer has versus individual grunts in the workplace. And that's one way to do it. Unions, guilds, professional associations, various collective bargaining tools. Those are not wrong. They're not bad. They're not something that needs to be gotten rid of necessarily. But there shouldn't be an imbalance of power in their direction either. And neither should they be given credit for things they didn't do single-handedly. So, but I want to move on to Movember, and actually, I didn't think about it, but I ought to get the Movember page open in the window here. So let's look at, if you open, by the way, in Movember.com, just Movember.com in general, most of the time, if you have a Movember website that's dedicated to your country, it'll come up, because when I just type in Movember.com, it takes me to the US Movember page. Let's see if I've got this the right size for, there we go. So the Movember initiative, their history is kind of neat. I kind of went over it a little bit early in the show, but if you look at, let's see if I can find their about page and their story, this really was kind of a neat beginning. And it's, if we go back to 2003, here is when it started. Let's see if I can get this to come up. It's loading slow. There we go. Okay, so they got their pictures and everything. This is where I was explaining about in the opening video. Two mates, and I hope I'm pronouncing this one guy's name right. I'm saying Garon. It might be Garon. It might be Jaron. So I could be completely wrong. But Travis Garon and Luke Slattery, they were just out for a beer, and they were just talking about mustaches, and how, you know, men didn't wear mustaches anymore, how it wasn't fashion, and they just challenged a bunch of their buddies. Yeah, it's not faggy. It's fuzzy.
Oh my, it's super faggy. Beards are totally hetero. Mustaches are faggy. Believe me, my man has to wear a mustache when he goes to work on site, because he has to be able to put on a gas mask. And I hate it because it's faggy.
I mean, I know where Karen's coming from. There's something about that where maybe it's culturally through like YMCA types and Freddie Mercury. But, well, I don't know where it came from, but there's sort of a distinct like look to a mustache that is either belonging in the 70s porno or faggy, as Karen says. But yeah, mutton chops or like a full beard, or like, yeah, that's some lumberjack sexy. That's good and masculine. For some reason, having the lower part added to the mustache, like you got to have obviously the mustache as well, like just the whole place of hair. It's nice. Yeah,
I tell you, like when he goes full wild and woolly, like, and he literally has, I mean, like his facial hair is actually growing up into the under circles of his eyes, right? Like, you know, not as thick as everywhere else, but like he's got stray beard hairs growing up like to within a centimeter of his eyelashes, you know, and then halfway down his neck, just like absolutely freaking. And when he gets wild and woolly, it's super, super hot. And when he has to shave, and he keeps this, he makes me do it. He makes me shave his head and then shave his, like, buzz his face, right? And leave the mustache and this tiny little soul patch, which is like, oh my God, you look like a pedophile. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why do you walk around like that? Right?
See, I like beards too.
No shade on the soul patches, but just the mustache alone, it can get a little awkward.
Then he says,
it's
says to me,
have at least a little patch to offset the mustache. You got to have the little patch.
Then he says to me, well, because if I shaved it all off, you'd look like a pedophile.
Well,
because he looks 14 years old with his face completely clean shaven. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things about facial hair in men. They do look more sophisticated and more mature with facial hair, and then you get, you know, there are professions where, you know, it's just not acceptable. You just can't have facial hair, and guys shave it all off, and it sort of goes along with the type of collar and everything. I don't know, it sort of looks, it doesn't just look neotenous, it looks over-controlled. You know,
Yeah.
like you're on a leash if you don't have that beard and mustache. But so these guys were basically looking for, you know, their buddies to take up the challenge. Well, the first thing they figured out from this is they had a bunch of guys that were very much willing to take up the challenge, bring back the mustache, and they found they could rally guys around this idea. Now that first year they didn't raise anything, but when they realized they could get guys rallied around this idea, then they decided, well, let's turn it into something.
Let's monetize it.
Yeah, let's what can we do with this that's good? And because you know, bringing back the mustache is fun and everything, but it's not necessarily anything special or spectacular. It's kind of like
it's not really good for anything.
Right. It's just good. It's kind of like when women do that
play
thing
Candy Crush.
Well, when they do that thing on Facebook where they're raising awareness, quote unquote, for breast cancer by doing some secretive thing, and then they have to explain it to everybody. Like the last year that I was asked to participate in, the last year I was asked to participate was that. You just say, wherever you put your purse, you say, I like it, and then you name the location. And nobody asked me to do the next year's thing after I said I like it hanging from a chair in front of the window where all the neighbors can see. So, like, they're all like, that's a little graphic. And he's like, I thought we were talking about a purse. At which point somebody reminded me, you don't carry a purse.
I like it. I like it at the secondhand store.
Yeah, there you go. And it accomplishes what? People know that breast cancer exists. Well, they already did. So
yeah,
you know, they looked at this and they're like, we can get this started. We can get a conversation going. We can get people involved in something. This is an initiative that can be done. And they decided they were going to donate money. So in 2004, they actually got what is the website says 480 people involved, and they raised $40,000, and they began funding men's health projects. Their initial donation was to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, because this was an Australian initiative, right? And that every year then it grew. 2005 they raised funds again for PCFA, and here now they're at over 9,000. They raised 921,000, and
there you go.
Yeah, so you see this explode, right, through these guys' leadership. They identified something that they could do. They identified something that they could get people enthusiastic about participating in. They identified a need in the community, and they put those things together. In 2006, it became international. They started funding also Beyond Blue, and Movember officially launches in New Zealand. They now have 65,000, almost 66,000 people involved, and they now have raised 8 million. And this continued to grow like this every year, from these men striving to get more people involved, striving to raise awareness for men's health, striving to raise awareness particularly of prostate and testicular cancers, something that isn't in the forefront of people's mind. Everybody has seen breast cancer awareness initiatives. Everybody has seen initiatives to raise money to treat breast cancer and to do research on new treatments for breast cancer and so on. But it was kind of a rare thing for people to even think about or talk about prostate cancer, even think about or talk about testicular cancer. At this point, they now have the U.S. involved, Prostate Cancer Foundation, Prostate Cancer Canada, Prostate Cancer Charity in the UK, and in Spain with the FEFOC. They have a board established, so now they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 countries involved, 200,000 Mobros and Sisters, and 27 million raised. 73 men's health projects. And this continued exponentially, every year. When we keep going down through this line, we will see increases every year. 300, almost 400,000 in 2008 people involved, 46 million, 152 health projects, and more.
I just want to interject. I apologize for not doing my part. It's halfway through No Shave November, and I have not cultivated a proper Lanny McDonald. And I seem to be cursed with a thin beard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know, me too. I have let my bush grow. It's uncomfortably itchy, but I hear from beard owners that passes. And but everything else though still has to.
Oh well, in that case,
everything else has to go. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of the female participation is in support for men who are growing their beards and mustaches out for this. There are women who actually can grow a mustache, but it's not as common, obviously.
It's not quite as socially acceptable either. So
no, it's not. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do here, and we're looking through this. Let me go to get involved. Now here we have. If you look on the menu here as I'm going through and highlighting things, there's Grow a Mustache. There's Move for Movember. We'll open that in another tab. Host a Moment, which I think anybody can host something. Let's see if this will load up for me. So they actually are now doing runs and walks. Move this Movember by running or walking 60 miles over the month. 60 miles for the 60 men we lose to suicide each hour, every hour. You don't have to be an ultra athlete. Just do it, basically. And so what they have here, I guess, is it's like a walkathon, except that you can do it on your own instead of in a group. And you just have to show evidence that you're doing what you've said you're going to do. And so they are also funding anti-suicide efforts. And you can host walks, you can host events, you can work with others, in your community to do this. So this is expanded from Grow a Mustache to all kinds of things. If you go to the website in your area here, you have everything from the mustache aspect of it that's always been there, to here you have the idea of hosting an event. And it can be anything. So they're encouraging people to meet up together, to work together on things, to have small events, to use their athletic interests any way they can to raise funds and raise awareness for men's health. Karen, are you taking off?
Yeah, I gotta go. I'm huddled in the bathroom right now.
Okie doke.
Away from the noise.
I see. Oh, all right. Well, we won't stick around here much longer because we're at about 2 hours, I think, in the show. But I want to highlight this simply because This is something that you don't necessarily see a lot. There's not a lot of initiatives out there that their focus on health is specific to men. There are dozens of initiatives, hundreds probably, where the focus is on women's health, and the women's experience of health conditions that affect both sexes, like heart conditions and lung conditions, diabetes and things like that. But there's not a lot of focus on men's health where it is just specifically men's health. And this is one that is a focus specifically on men's health, and it's on men's sexual health, men's reproductive health, men's mental health, and suicide prevention. So I don't know if either one of you had anything you wanted to add to this before I go on to the rest of the super chats. I think Karen already stepped out.
Oh no, you can go ahead and read the rest.
Okay, then I will go on to the super chats. I know we have we're getting to the point where we have to end the show anyway, but we have. Okay, Linux Freebird gave us $100, but didn't say anything. Linux, had you intended to have a message come through with that? That's an awfully big super chat, and thank you very much for that. If you did intend for something to come through with that, let us know. And then Midnight Street gave us €5 and said, "Girls, nobody is talking beards regarding you. There's other things you can avoid shaving." I think we hit that. Oh, for Brian. Okay. So Linux Freebird gave us $100 and sort of in Brian's name. And again, thank you very much for that. And that's when our own family here at Honey Badger Radio has been hit with men's cancers. And Brian went through his ordeal, and thankfully he is in remission. But this can hit anybody. You know, he's not old. He's Gen Xer, like me, and I have seen this hit even younger. So this is definitely something to be well aware of. We follow the one. Karn 33333 says we follow the one shoe for Brian, which has to be a reference to Monty Python's The Life of Brian. But I think we have kind of talked to the subject to the point where we are running out of interactions. So, and it is to the end of just about 2 hours. And so I'm going to go ahead, and since we have lost our Karen, before I go towards ending the show, though, Anna, you want to go ahead and shill your stuff?
I do want to shill. I love shilling.
There we go. It's the shilling.
No, it is the shilling. There's a twist ending. No, there's no twist. Just that, of course, we very, very much appreciate your super chats and the support of this channel, and all the tips go towards paying the wages of people who bring you these shows. I mean, I know it's not a lot, obviously. You guys know you donate, but every little bit counts. Every little bit helps, and it all goes to people who help you enjoy this show and do a lot of behind the scenes work that you wouldn't even know goes into producing something like this every week. A lot of us here, though, are also volunteers, myself included, and I would very much appreciate the ability to do more shows like this, which means ability to take off more time off work, which means crowdfunding. And we all know I've been harassed. Support my Patreon. So I have one of those. It's patreon.com/AnnaCherry. And I would recommend you guys check out the Challenger level. Every month you get an option of hanging out in a Cherry STEM after show hangout, as well as the occasional hangouts I do in the after shows after this show. So many after show, after party, lots of afters. It's a good time anyway. Definitely check it out if you have the means. If you can support me without hardship, please do so at patreon.com/AnnaCherry. Very, very much appreciate your support of the Honey Badger Radio, and stay awesome.
Oh, and also your show. You also do Cherry Stem is your show. Do you have a regular day you want to talk about, or?
For sure, yeah. No. For those who were enjoying that segment on HBR, Cherry Stem, we actually still continue doing it in a slightly different format, but essentially the meat is the same of Cherry Stem on my personal channel, which is just youtube.com/AnnaCherry. And I believe there is a link in the low bar of this video, or usually is. And you can check it out there. It's on Sundays. We've moved up to try and do it more than once a month. But every first Sunday of the month, you will usually get it. My Discord is also free for pretty much everyone to join. There are special rooms for patrons, of course, but there's updates on Cherry Stem stuff there as well. So once you become a patron, you get notified of all sorts of things Cherry Stem related. But if you're just a viewer, subscribe to the channel, click that bell icon, whatever it is you got to do to make sure YouTube notifies you when new videos go up. And there's also free to download and listen Cherry Stems of everything we've done, which is about 30 episodes, on my Patreon as well. So they're available for the public, the archives essentially. And yeah, we do them on Sundays. The time is a bit in flux right now that we're trying to fit more than one a month. But that's definitely something that we are continuing to do. So if you enjoyed those streams, check out my YouTube channel and continue enjoying the Cherry Stems. Thanks for bringing that up, Hannah.
Well, I definitely wanted to draw people's attention to that, because that's something that, we discuss a lot of different things on this show, and or on the various shows that the Honey Badger Radio has and everything. But it's kind of neat that we're able to present more than just. We talk about the political issues and we talk about the latest news and everything, but we have Anna's got Cherry Stem. She talks more scientific things, and then we've also got Prim talking more in terms of like mental health and so on. So we have quite a variety of things that we've been able to branch out to, and I want everybody to know about all of the shows and not just like the news stuff and the issues stuff, because that's important stuff to pay attention to. So but with that, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to us, and even though Karen's not here to hear it, thanks for both of my co-hosts for coming onto the show and talking about the issues. And I want to remind everybody, we talked about, got to talk about Movember and everything, but I think everybody should go visit the Movember website. And if you just type like November or Movember.com into your address bar, it should bring up the one for your country. If you have, because they're international, they're all across the globe now. And if it doesn't bring up a particular country, because you're not, there's not a website in your country yet, it'll take you probably to the US one or to the Australian one. So definitely go check out the site. You might find that there is something that you can do, and it would be a great way to, again, not just raise awareness of men's health issues, but be able to contribute to men's health initiatives. And so I would like to see more people go to the site and check that out. And with that, thank you all and good night.